I want to do a little bit of hand stitch on here just to tell you how I would approach that process, where I might place hand stitch and how I might integrate the hand stitch into the machine embroidery in relation to these really padded areas I've got on here. So I'm back on the sofa because it's literally is the most comfortable place to hand stitch. So I'm trying to move it over so that it's cool, because this is quite a big hoop. Because as I say, my smaller hoop doesn't tighten properly. I've actually, since I made the last videos that you had previously, I've ordered a load of hoops on the internet, so hopefully they'll come soon. So I'm doing it in the opposite way that I would have it on the machine. I'm doing the normal hand stitch way, okay. So it needs to be, you know, really quite tight in here. I'm trying to rest my elbow on the arm of the sofa and get this in the right position. Hopefully, meaning you can see what I'm doing. So what I've already got bullion knots around there, but because I've put paper on there, I want to kind of integrate it a bit more. So I'm probably going to do some French knots, around here, just around the edge of the paper, and perhaps there's some French knots in there already, just to extend those out a bit. So that's what I'll do first. So as I say, I use cotton embroidery almost exclusively. I'm looking for a needle. So almost exclusively use cotton embroidery. Cotton embroidery is quite a matte thread for those of you who don't know, whereas cotton pearl has a bit of a sheen to it. So I prefer to use, excuse me, bit of indigestion there, I've just had my lunch. So I prefer to use the matte threads. They just appeal to me. It's a personal choice thing, isn't it? We all have our own favourite threads that we like to use, and cotton embroidery is mine. So I'll put a knot in this. Just put a couple of knots in the end to make sure it's big enough. So if I come up here, where those French knots are, and continue with a few French knots, just to spill out and perhaps allow them to meet the paper. So I don't know, I'm assuming actually, probably wrongly, that most of you know how to do a French knot. But if you don't, you just pull it through and you hold it with your thumb and forefinger. I'm right-handed, so this is my left hand, I'm holding that thread in. And then you wrap your needle round 3 times, and then you go back down 1 millimetre or less away from where you came up. You pull that tight, so those wraps go tight around your needle, and then you pull that through to the back, and it's as simple as that. Okay, so I'll just do that again. I'll do it in a descriptive manner once more, and then I'll just continue to stitch them. So pull it tight, thumb and forefinger. Can you see that? 1, 2, 3. Put it back 1 millimetre away from where you came up. Pull it tight again, so those wraps are down on the bottom of the needle, and then pull that through. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, kind of in a random manner, I'll say random, it isn't random, is it? Because I'm conscious of the fact that I want it to look integrated, and I want these knots to actually start to spill onto this machine stitched paper. So there, that's the first one going through the paper. So it's almost, well, there's very little difference between stitching through the silk with the paper on top than through the normal silk. I mean, it's just so easy to do it. So they're kind of coming out of there now and encroaching on the paper area. Okay. So if I just do one more there. There. So that's that little area. That's sufficient for now, because don't forget, that's sufficient for now, because don't forget I've got more paper to work on here. I'm not saying I'm going to work this piece to completion, it's my working sample for this particular part of this class. But if I was to continue with this to make a finished piece, it would have more paper on there. So I don't really want any hand stitches where I might be machine stitching the paper. I would do them last after the paper had gone on in that area. So I'll just tie it off at the back. I'm a bit hoarse. Don't know what that's all about. So then just snip it off and re-knot the threads to start working in a different area. I don't drag my thread across the back when I'm hand embroidering. I just don't. It's not good practice, and if you get out of the habit, it becomes second nature not to do that. So up here where the bullion knots are, I don't think I need any more bullion knots up there. So again, I'm going to start in the paper there, and just on this bit of silk that's free, do a couple of French knots that meet up with those bullion knots, and also embellish that plain silk a little bit. I've got like a strand of the silk here from the mulberry paper, so I'm literally just going to catch it down. I'm not going to take it off, I'm just going to catch it down with that French knot. And my next French knot will actually be bedded right up against these bullion knots, so these should hopefully look as if they're spilling out from under the bullion knots. Now when I take pictures of this, you may not notice the difference. You may think it looks exactly the same as the pictures that you had yesterday, but you know it isn't, and you've actually seen me doing this, so you know that it isn't the same. I mean, what have I done? Maybe 9-10 French knots on here, so it's not necessarily going to be glaringly obvious, but you'll see them if you look for them. And I'm also going to add some bullions over here anyway, so they'll be different. So that's those French knots completed now in that area. It just adds encrustation. It's just, I mean, I want to embellish to death, usually. That's what I'm about, I think, embellishing to death. So it just adds something. Give a piece as much as you can. As much as is humanly possible from your point of view, give that to a piece of work. So that's that there. So that's that little area finished now. So like I said, I'm going to come and do a couple of bullion knots around here. And then I'll take this to the table and I'll damp stretch it, so that those of you who've never seen damp stretching or never done damp stretching will learn how to do that. My thread's come off my needle. Okay, so that's that. Now I need quite a long bit of thread for bullion knots because they take up a lot of thread. So I'm going to change threads, and for a bullion knot I use a milliner's needle, and that's because, or a straw needle they're called, and they're all bent. All my bullion needles are bent because that just happens. That's a bullion needle, and you can see, can you see it? That's how bent it is. They come in straight in a packet and they're never straight, and you'll find that yours bend as well. They're very thin, and the eye is the same width as the tip, and that's so it pulls through easy. They're also called straw needles, I think, so you know, look for them if you don't have any. And I'm going to quite a long piece of thread. Now most bullion knots are done with like 1/4 of an inch take, you'll see what I mean by that in a minute, and 8 wraps. But I do the 1/4 of an inch take and I do 30 wraps because I like them to be really, really loopy. So you practice and decide which, you know, which one you prefer. You could do a mix of both, but I'm just obsessed with loopy bullion knots and do, you know, overwrap and overwrap. So to do a bullion knot, I want to do them here. So if I come up there at the very edge of that buttonhole stitch, it's actually encroaching through some paper. There's some paper there, so we'll call this A. I'm going to go down at B, which is about maybe 1/2 inch away actually, and up again at A. So down at B and up again at A. Leave your needle in your work, don't pull it through, leave it in your work, and then wrap round, okay? So I'm going to wrap 30 times. Okay. Then I push my needle up from the back, and then I get hold of it at the top, and I'm keeping tight hold of those wraps. Alright, and what's going to happen is I'm going to pull the needle through there, and this thread that's coming out of the bottom of the needle is going to form a core within those wraps. So pull it through. It's never this difficult when I'm not on camera. For some reason it's always more difficult when I'm on camera. And I also seem to get more knots when I'm on camera as well, which is very frustrating because this doesn't happen when I'm doing it on my own. I've got a knot in here, I think. No, it's alright. So you pull it right through and you're left with something like that. Push them down, those wraps down, okay? And then take your needle back through B, where it came up. And if you get a little loop at the end of your loops of bullions, just pull your wraps like that and pull it through like that, kind of spring it back. So that's a 30 wrap with 1/2 inch between A and B. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come up here now, and this is A again, and I'm going to put B just to the top of that last one, which is a bit less distance, so hopefully I'll have more of a loop going on. Okay, back up again through A, find my thread, and wrap again. Okay, pull them through, and again push it down and take it back through B. So that's 2, and that still isn't really as loopy as I would like it. If you saw the piece on my blog the other day, my doodle piece, they're how I like them really. So I'm just going to come up the next one, very short distance away from that last one I just did, and take a much shorter space between A and B, and back up at A and turn around again and wrap again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so that's that. Pull that through there and push that down again. Back down through B, and hopefully, see, that's standing up prouder. Can you see that? So that's prouder than the other two because there's less distance between A and B. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this needle for now and do a couple of French knots around this, clustering this as if they're nestling against this, just to add a little bit more titivation, which is a favourite word of mine. So that's how I would approach this embroidery. Now what about embroidering on this bit of paper that's just a blank bit of paper? Well, yes, I would definitely embroider on that as well. And I think what I quite fancy doing on that, I'll just do another French knot. What I quite fancy doing on here are random clusters of French knots. So I'll just fasten this off again, and I'll have to get some more thread. Bullion knots with 30 wraps take up a lot of thread, so bear that in mind. I don't know, I get 4 or 5 maybe, because if my thread's too long, if I threaded a needle with enough thread to do maybe 10 bullion knots, then I'd always be getting it in knots, and it would be a nightmare. I'd be forever getting rid of knots and things. So I'm just going to change my needle again and do something on here, and then I will go and damp stretch this so that you can learn how to do that if you don't already know how to do that. But also you'll know how the paper responds to damp stretching and how it doesn't deteriorate or damage the paper in any way. I've got a cushion here that I'm trying to use to cover my foot. I've got horrible feet, I hate my feet. I don't want you to come here thinking it's all going to be lovely, feminine, pretty embroidery and have to look at my feet. So if it was visible, I do apologise. So again, not my thread. So just literally, I kind of like to do, I don't know what to call them, like groups of French knots that are quite an organic shape. So not like a circle of 5 or a circle of 7, but a random shape, like it's torn off the corner of something perhaps. So maybe 15 or 16 French knots would make one of those shapes. I'm not quite sure. I'm on my 3rd one now, so I'll see. I'll try and do this little kind of weird shape, which to be honest won't necessarily show up fantastically because of the white on the white, but I think I've just looked in the camera viewer and I think you can see it. So when I come back next time, I'm not sure what to do with you next time. I may well do, because I need some violin, and because I've been away, it went out of my head and I didn't order any, so I've just ordered some violin today when I ordered those hoops, and it may not be here for making the next video. So I may next time continue with this paper thing, but with when I set a full sheet on top of some embroidered fabric, okay, probably do that next time. And that, hopefully you're going to have that before the weekend, because we've only got 2 weeks and I want to fit everything in. So, but don't forget, you're under no pressure to keep up with me. You can watch these as whenever you like. You can watch them next Christmas if you want, it doesn't matter. You've got them forever now, so. So that's kind of like an organic grouping, I would say, of French knots. Okay. So really, you've got quite a bit to be going on with, haven't you? You could be doing this. I mean, I don't know. You might race ahead with it, you might love it, you might want to devote a lot of time to this. That's the good thing, I think, about this class, is that take from it what you want. Well, any class really. Take from it what you want and use it how you want. And you'll always have the library of information of everything else, because you don't ever lose that. So, right, so that's a group in there of knots. I'm hoping you can see them there. I think you probably can. So that would be my inclination, would be to do that in several places on here. Okay, so I'll fasten that off, and then I'll turn the camera off and we'll go to the table and I'll damp stretch this. And that's another thing, sorry, I should have said in the first video, don't forget to leave seam allowances when you're cutting your cloth. Enough for hemming if you might want to hem, and enough for pinning out damp stretching. I do apologise that I didn't say that, but you do need a certain amount of space around the edges of your work for your damp stretching pins, but that'll become clear when I get to the damp stretching process in a second. Okay.